Good afternoon. This is Secure Acres Natural Bees. Today we have a very exciting video planned for you today. And of course we'll be talking about the Central Commandments to Natural Beekeeping. These policies can be found in the book Keeping Bees with a Smile, written by Federal Zooten and co-written by Dr. Leah Sharashkin. It's an excellent book on keeping bees, and as natural beekeepers, these are the policies we've been using. We don't exactly expect you as beekeepers to utilize these policies, but we want you to know exactly how we've been keeping bees in our apiary. So if you enjoy the video, give us a like, consider subscribing to our community, and here we go. Okay, so if we're talking about being natural beekeepers, this is the information we really want to look to. This book, written by Federal Zooten and co-written by Dr. Leah Sharashkin, gives us a plethora of information of natural beekeeping. But what is natural beekeeping? I mean, is anybody a natural beekeeper? Well, when we talk about natural beekeeping, we're talking about keeping bees in a way that replicates how they live in the wild. So the commandments that we look inside this book, they give us a system that basically says, okay, we're going to try to replicate how they do live in the wild. And it's really as simple as that, but the information, if you're looking to become a natural beekeeper, this is where you got to go. So the first central commandment of natural beekeeping is only keeping bees of the local race. And basically what that means is we could get our bees in packages or nucleus hives, and they could come from South Carolina or Georgia. Of course, we're in North Carolina, but they could come from a long distance away, and we could introduce the bees up here. However, the problem with this is if you bring bees from a far distance, you are bringing bees that are used to a climate that could be completely different than your climate from where you're at now. There's a beekeeping shop not far from us that sells bees from South Carolina, and of course we're in the mountains of North Carolina where it's a lot cooler. So the bees that you receive from a far distance, they're not going to be used to that different change in temperature, and you could have a high failure rate. If we keep bees of the local race, and we basically keep bees that are from our area, and you can of course do that really easily by catching swarms, but if we keep them of the local race, those bees will be most adapted to our climate, most adapted to our environment, and they are going to do very well and have a very high chance of success. So once we start talking about the next commandment of natural beekeeping, as Federal Zooten defines, it's keep your bees in natural horizontal hives with extra deep frames or in log hives. The hives should be warm and spacious and should be left at a single location year-round. So when we talk about different types of hive systems, of course the Land's hive has a much bigger frame than the Langstroth hive. And if you really want to look at the differences between the two, then I highly recommend you check out our popular video, The Benefits of the Horizontal Hive. And you can basically see the differences between the Land's hive and the Langstroth hive. But one key difference is, of course, the size of the frame between the two hives. And if we look at the frame size for the Lands, we see that it's actually much longer, and it can actually, the winter cluster actually has a lot more room to move upward during the winter time, and they have a lot more space to eat food. So keeping bees in big spacious hives, one thing that's nice about it also is, of course, the walls itself are actually twice as thick than the Langstroth hive. And so this helps for better insulation against the summer heat and better insulation for the winter cold. So big horizontal hives that have bigger frames, the bees tend to mesh a little bit better with this, and also the walls being a little bit thicker, it just protects them from the outside weather a lot more. And if we actually see where bees live in the wild, they live in trees where the wood is, multiple inches thick, and they just do a lot better in these systems. So that's why Zooten tells us that if we are keeping bees in big horizontal hives with big frames, it's just a lot healthier for the bees. So talking about the next central commandment of natural beekeeping. This is going to be a little different, and a few of you might raise an eyebrow to this, because this is something even we used to do when we followed more traditional beekeeping ethics. Never feed your bees sugar. Swarm colonies that haven't managed to gather enough reserves may be fed with supplemental honey. Don't pull honey for the duration of the summer honey flow. Surplus honey may be pulled during the fall or spring, leaving at least 50 pounds of honey for the average size colony for the winter. So a lot of beekeepers in the US right now do feed their bees sugar water. And it's kind of common knowledge that people just think, hey, we can just give our bees sugar water and that's fine. However, this is kind of like the soda version of the nectar that they can collect out in nature. And having a constant supply of sugar, it can kind of, I'm not going to say it's going to totally, hurt the bees, but it can definitely get them used to something that is not necessarily natural. And remember, this is natural beekeeping we're talking about. And in this system, we're trying to let the bees really go out and collect for themselves. However, if you do have bees that might, maybe they need to be fed for some reason, maybe that you're having a lot of rain or something like that, then you can feed them honey instead. And that honey is a lot healthier for them than just plain old sugar water. So if you are looking for the more natural way, then feeding your bees some honey, that's a pretty good way to get started. All right, so next on our list, and this is probably one of my favorite commandments in the Natural Beekeeping Central Commandments. Don't bother the bees unless extremely necessary, with the exception of the 2 major annual inspections, one in the spring and one in the fall. Now, this is a lot different than traditional beekeeping, where we are taught to go in our hives multiple times throughout the year, sometimes as much as twice a month, or whatever. What you really got to think of is when you open these hives to look at these bees, the temperature suddenly changes whenever you crack open the top, and the bees are suddenly very stressed out, and it is a really stressful event for them. They don't really understand what's going on, and this happens every single time you open the hive. This can have a wide range of effects on your bees. They could abscond. It could just be a number of things that could upset them. So when we talk about natural beekeeping, of course, bees in the wild that live in trees, they are never inspected or anything from human beings. And so they are a lot healthier because they're just a lot less stressed. If you go into your hives frequently and constantly, you are going to stress out your bees. So if we're talking about being natural beekeepers, the truth is we can get away with having healthy hives and only inspecting them once or twice a year. Federal Lazutin used to say that he would only inspect his hives once a year, but even that was one time too many, because he knew that there was a lot of stress involved in opening the hives. So a lot less checking can be pretty healthy for your bees, and it can give them a much more natural feel. All right, so moving on. This is our next Natural Beekeeping Central Commandment, and this is a pretty good one, and one that we just learned last year, and it has been very effective for us. Only propagate your bees naturally through swarming. So, of course, most beekeepers in the US nowadays, they will basically go packages and nucleus hives. And kind of like we spoke about earlier about keeping bees of the local race, if you're buying your bees through packages and stuff like this, then you're getting them from a faraway location and they might not be adapted to your climate. If you are catching swarms, then you are always catching bees of the local race. And that can be pretty effective, and you could have some pretty healthy bees. And last year we caught 4 swarms, this year we've caught 5 swarms. I mean, it is just a much cheaper way of catching bees than constantly going and spending $150, $200 for a single package of bees, and they've got a good chance of dying. So instead of doing that, you can keep bees of the local race, and of course you can catch swarms. And hey, we got a great video for that too. It's called the Swarm Catcher. So if you want to hear about how to catch swarms successfully, we challenge you to go check that video out. All right, so moving along. The next central commandment: allow bees to arrange their winter nest themselves. That is, don't rearrange it yourself during the fall. Now, a lot of beekeepers, or a lot of traditional beekeepers, and a lot of traditional books will teach you, okay, well actually you can assort the brood in a certain way, and the honey in the other way. You can do all kinds of different types of rearrangement. However, if we look at natural beekeeping, and if that's what we really want to do, then we've got to let the bees be able to arrange the hives for themselves. We know that when they arrange that comb, that they are sorting it in just a certain way that is best suited for them. So it's a pretty simple commandment. However, a lot of traditional ways teach us to, arrange the comb in a certain way. Natural beekeeping is defined by saying that we're going to allow the bees to make the decisions for themselves, and that way they will have a pretty healthy hive. Okay, so moving right along, we're getting kind of close to the end, but our next commandment is going to be another one that some beekeepers are going to be kind of like, I don't know about that. But the truth is, this is just more towards natural beekeeping, and we're just going to talk about it. So, don't subject your bees to any sort of medical treatment. Let them cope with diseases themselves. It is no catastrophe if a weak colony perishes. Any surviving colonies will produce strong and healthy offspring. So, of course, we have a video on this called A Case for Treatment-Free Beekeeping that you can check out. But to keep it simple, bees in the wild, at least the ones that live in the trees and don't have any interaction with human beings, don't receive any kind of treatment whatsoever. And some of them live and some of them perish. And the truth is, the ones that survive and produce healthy swarms for the environment are producing swarms that are adapted to the environment and that are adapted to being able to be treatment-free. So if we keep bees in our apiary and we basically say, okay, we're going to keep bees without applying treatment to them, then the bees will basically, some will survive and some will perish, but the ones that do survive will produce healthy swarms. So those swarms, we can catch those swarms and we can add to our apiary, and then we'll have more and more healthy genetics in our apiary. So keeping bees in this type of way is just a more natural feel for them, and the ones that survive will be really healthy. And at the end of the day, we want to be able to have bees that can survive on their own without that human interaction. And if we have bees that are being sent off into the wild that are swarming from our colonies, we want those bees to have the best chance of success. And that is why we choose to be treatment-free. All right, so we're finally at the last commandment. And this is one that, I'll be honest with you, I haven't necessarily obeyed the best myself, but we are working on it. But anyway, we think you'll like it. In addition, a natural beekeeper is simply obligated in working with his or her bees and eating their honey to gradually improve his or her own health, and with his or her overall appearance, inspire those around him or her to set up a bee colony or two. So, of course, we all know that if we eat a little healthier and we have good bodies, then we can live a little bit longer, and of course we can help the bees even more. So this is something that, we're working on too, and, I'm sure a lot of you could probably work on as well, but that's okay. Sometimes we put on a little bit of weight. But if we have healthy bodies, then we can live longer and we can inspire those around us to pick up the art of natural beekeeping, or just beekeeping in general, and basically help these pollinators survive for a long time. So we thank you so much for joining us for this video. Again, I highly recommend this book, written by Fedor Lazutin and co-written by Dr. Leo Shurashkin. This book has just so much information, and you will just be astounded by what you'll learn by reading it. So we hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you soon.